The winter dawn over the Ukrainian steppe in 1941 did not arrive gently. It crept in low and gray, carrying with it the sound of engines that seemed too deep, too heavy to belong to anything the German army had encountered before. Panzer crews peered through frost-crusted optics and felt a tightening in their chests as unfamiliar silhouettes emerged from the fog. These were not the thin-skinned tanks they had shattered in Poland or France. These machines moved with a slow, unstoppable confidence, their sloped steel faces deflecting shells that should have torn them apart. In that moment of disbelief, before doctrine could catch up to reality, the psychological balance of the war shifted. The T-34 was not just a tank appearing on a battlefield. It was the physical manifestation of a hidden industrial, intellectual, and psychological struggle that had been unfolding for years beyond the sight of foreign intelligence services. The story of the T-34 begins not with heroism, but with fear. Fear born from the Soviet Union's own failures. In the late 1930s, Soviet observers watched the Spanish Civil War with growing unease as lightly armored tanks burned under modern anti-tank guns. Quiet reports moved through classified channels, stripped of ideology and rhetoric, concluding that speed alone could no longer save armored forces. Engineers in Kharkov, working under the shadow of purges that erased colleagues overnight, began experimenting with ideas that seemed heretical at the time. Sharply sloped armor to increase effective thickness, wide tracks to float over mud and snow, and a diesel engine that reduced fire risk and extended operational range. Each design choice was a response to a lesson learned in blood elsewhere, filtered through a system where failure meant more than professional embarrassment. It meant disappearance. What made the T-34 terrifying was not that it was perfect, it was that it was brutally honest. The tank acknowledged the reality of Eastern Europe's terrain and climate in a way no Western design truly had. German intelligence, lulled by assumptions of Soviet backwardness, had failed to grasp how deeply the USSR had internalized the lessons of mechanized warfare. Abwehr reports focused on numbers and outdated models, missing the conceptual leap happening inside Soviet design bureaus. When Operation Barbarossa began, it was supposed to be a war of annihilation completed before winter. Instead, it became an intelligence failure etched into steel. As the Wehrmacht advanced, they encountered a tank that refused to behave as expected. Standard anti-tank rounds shattered or ricocheted. Crews fired again and again, convinced their sights were misaligned. The psychological impact was immediate and corrosive. German after-action reports described panic, a word rarely used in official documents. The T-34 did not simply destroy tanks, it destroyed assumptions. Blitzkrieg relied on predictability, on the enemy reacting in known ways. The T-34 introduced uncertainty, and uncertainty spread faster than any armored column. Behind the front lines, another battle raged in silence. Entire Soviet factories were dismantled, loaded onto trains, and sent east beyond the Ural Mountains in an operation so vast it bordered on the unreal. Workers, many of them women and teenagers, reassembled machine tools in frozen fields while German bombers searched for targets that no longer existed. Chelyabinsk, soon nicknamed Tankigrad, became a city where night never truly fell, its furnaces glowing red against the snow. This was industrial warfare stripped to its core, where survival depended on production numbers achieved through exhaustion and fear. The T-34 rolling off those lines carried not just armor and ammunition, but the accumulated suffering of a displaced nation. Yet the tank's greatest weapon was invisibility of a different kind. Maskirovka, the Soviet doctrine of deception, cloaked movements and intentions behind layers of misinformation. Dummy tanks made of wood drew Luftwaffe bombs, while real armored units waited unseen. Radio silence, false orders, and deliberate leaks confused German intelligence analysts already struggling to interpret the sheer scale of Soviet resources. The T-34 benefited from this fog, appearing where it was least expected, reinforcing the illusion of endless reserves. German commanders began to speak of fighting not an army, but an environment, one that produced tanks as relentlessly as it produced winter. Inside the T-34, conditions were harsh, almost medieval. Early models lacked radios, forcing commanders to communicate with flags under fire. Visibility was poor, ergonomics brutal. Crews bled, froze, and suffocated inside their own machines. But these shortcomings forged a particular psychological resilience. Soviet tankers learned to fight blind, to rely on instinct and aggression. They closed distance quickly, knowing their armor could withstand punishment long enough to deliver killing blows. In close combat, the T-34 became a predator, its presence crushing morale as effectively as it crushed steel. German engineers raced to respond, their efforts culminating in the Panther, a tank inspired directly by the T-34's sloped armor and wide tracks. This was a tacit admission of defeat on the conceptual level. The T-34 had forced the Reich to redesign its vision of armored warfare mid-conflict, diverting precious resources and time. Meanwhile, Soviet factories continued to simplify the T-34, stripping it down to what mattered most: a gun that could kill, armor that could endure, and an engine that could run on fuel scavenged from chaos. Complexity was a luxury the Eastern Front could not afford. At Kursk, the largest armored engagement in history, the T-34 was everywhere and nowhere at once. Hidden in tree lines and earthworks, it waited as German forces advanced into a killing zone shaped by intelligence gleaned from intercepted communications and partisan reports. The battle was not a spontaneous clash, but a carefully prepared trap. Mines, artillery, and waves of armor broke the German offensive momentum permanently. The T-34, often destroyed in staggering numbers, still achieved its purpose through attrition. Soviet doctrine accepted losses as the cost of inevitability. Every destroyed tank was replaced faster than the enemy could adapt, turning industrial capacity into a psychological weapon. Lend-Lease trucks and rails kept Stalingrad alive, a rarely acknowledged thread connecting American factories to Soviet steel. Intelligence cooperation, cautious and limited, ensured that certain technologies and materials flowed eastward, quietly shaping production. The T-34 became a hybrid symbol, fiercely Soviet in spirit, yet sustained by a global anti-fascist network operating behind diplomatic curtains. War, in this sense, was not fought by nations alone, but by systems of supply, secrecy, and shared necessity. As the Red Army advanced westward, the T-34 transformed from a desperate defensive tool into an instrument of occupation and revenge. Cities fell beneath its tracks, and the sound of its engine became synonymous with inevitability. For civilians, it was both liberator and harbinger of new fear. The tank carried with it the unresolved trauma of years of annihilation, projecting that trauma outward as it moved deeper into Europe. The psychological weight of the T-34 did not dissipate with victory. It lingered in memories, photographs, and the cold steel monuments that still stand today. When the war ended, analysts in the West studied captured T-34s with a mix of admiration and unease. They recognized that the tank had not won the war alone, but it had revealed a truth many preferred to ignore. Wars are decided not just by brilliance or bravery, but by the ruthless alignment of design, doctrine, and deception. The T-34 embodied a hidden dimension of World War II, where survival demanded the abandonment of elegance in favor of relentless functionality. Long after the guns fell silent, the T-34 continued to haunt military thinking. Its legacy lived on in Cold War doctrines, in the belief that quantity, when fused with intelligent simplicity, could overwhelm even the most advanced opposition. The tank that emerged from fear and secrecy had reshaped the world's understanding of mechanized warfare. It stood as a reminder that behind every visible victory lies a shadow war of factories moved in darkness, intelligence failures buried in archives, and human lives consumed to give steel its terrible purpose. The T-34 did not just roll across battlefields, it rolled through history's hidden corridors, leaving tracks that lead not only to victory, but to the unsettling realization of what total war truly demands.